Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I just want to make a quick note about today's video, and that is it's quite a bit different than my normal content. Namely, it's more like a podcast this week, and that's because I interviewed my good friend Tanja, who is an expert on the subject that we talked about, namely safety and gender equality in Japan. I highly encourage you to listen to the entire conversation because we covered a lot of ground. But in this video, I mostly play the role of the interviewer, meaning I ask a lot of questions and mostly get out of Tanya's way so that she can explain things in her own way. And as such, I want to put it out to you if you would like a follow-up video where I go more into depth into my own thoughts and opinions about these subjects. I'd be happy to make that video if people are interested. So let me know in the comments if you are interested in that. But I highly encourage you to listen to the entirety of this conversation because it really was an interesting talk. And without further ado, let's meet Tanja.
A lot of Japanese women do not want to rent first floor apartments because there are safety concerns. Generally, my understanding is that every elementary school child in this country gets an alarm. The school gives them alarm when they hit grade one. I was actually told by a lawyer, quote unquote, sometimes it's just better to get hit. Part of that too is for men, and this is what I don't understand is, happy wife, happy life. If you marry a career-driven woman and you are not taking on your fair share of the domestic labor, she doesn't need to stay with you. She's financially independent. I have been very blessed. One of the reasons why I'm saying this is because a lot of the times when I have this discussion with men or men know about me and they know about my research, it's very much like, oh, she's a feminazi. She's one of them. She hates men. And that's not the case at all. I have had a lot of amazing men in my life support my career and open doors for me. And I feel very blessed for that. And some people are going to come and say, oh, you hate Japan. You're being so critical. No, I want Japan to be a better place because this is my home.
What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul, and I make videos about Japanese society, life, and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I've been here for 20 years, and my guest today has been here for just as long. It's my good friend Tanja, and she's joining today because she has a doctorate in education, and she is an expert in gender issues and gender equality issues. And so I'm just going to let her introduce herself, please.
Thanks, Paul, for inviting me here. Yeah, I have a doctorate in education, educational leadership, and I wrote my dissertation on addressing gender inequity in Japanese higher education. So looking at sort of the gender norms, gender stereotypes, gender barriers. I should probably say now at this point when I'm talking about, cis male, female, when we are referring to gender in this, not to exclude anybody in that conversation, but just that there is a focal point on the differences between the lived presenting male and presenting female experiences within working within higher education here in Japan. So that's my background. Yeah.
Great. And as a doctor, you do have to be very specific with your language. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, don't cancel me.
Exactly.
I'm speaking from my experiences as a female who presents as a woman. So wouldn't want to misinterpret or speak for another group that I don't have the lived experiences. So
Understood. And speaking of lived experiences, the very first thing I wanted to ask you today was based on lived experiences of viewers of mine who, in a video that I did a few months ago, I was talking about general safety issues in Japan. And I brought up the fact that as a guy, I don't have the experience of being a woman in Japan and what that would be like. And I brought up a couple of issues that you commonly hear about, such as underwear theft and stalking or weird propositions from randos on the train or whatever. And my comment section was flooded with female viewers who, yo, yeah, I had my underwear stolen 3 months ago. This weird guy was trying to follow me, and so that is one of the big reasons I wanted to talk to you. I've been wanting to talk. We've tried to do this, get together and do this for a couple of years now, I think. I kept hoping we could do it in person,
yeah,
but
that didn't work out.
Zoom is second best. But I wanted to bring this topic up first because of all the comments of my viewers, and about 30% of my viewership, according to the YouTube stats, is people living in Japan. And so it's all these women who are here or used to live here, and we're sharing their experiences. So I guess the question is, how widespread are these issues that I mentioned, and how big is the gap between the perceived safety of Japan for a man versus a woman?
Wow. Okay, we're starting with the big questions.
And
Um,
that was maybe a very broad question, but I
I
figure
think
you're
so.
the expert who can narrow
I'm
it
the
down.
expert. Okay. So I think that there is this perceived notion, Japan is a safe country. Japan is a safe country. I will disagree. It's one of the reasons why you have me on here. I'm gonna, straight out of the gate, I'm gonna disagree with that. Japan is a much safer country than many other places. Absolutely. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. But is it safe? I mean, we're gonna have to define safe on that. We, it becomes, one of these things where I would say that Japan is predominantly safe if you're male. Um, it is not a safe country if you are a small child, if you're a child or you are a woman. There's lots of there's lots of research on that, and then people will bring up statistics and rape statistics and violent crime and America and guns, and I'm not American, and I don't actually think that um, comparing Japan to what I would say is extreme countries in terms of gun control and school shootings and things like that is valid. It's a useless point. It's not as dangerous as North Korea. Well, great. We're not living in North Korea. Um, I think that most women in Japan, and again, I can't speak for Japanese women. I can't speak for women of color. I can speak for, my experiences. Um, but I think you would be really hard pressed to find any woman at my age, I'm in my 40s, who has not had some sort of experience of either harassment or abuse or blatant sexism, discrimination, and again, what do we want to define as safe and non-safe, or violent crime versus non-violent crime, and harassment versus abuse and whatnot. But yeah, a lot of women have certainly had experiences in Japan that they would not necessarily have in their own home country, or they have had similar experiences in their own home country as they have had here. So, yes, I've never had my underwear stolen. Yay.
Okay.
This is the first time. I'm now currently living on the first floor, because a lot of places, when I came to Japan, I started off as an eikaiwa teacher. And eikaiwa, this was a long time ago, generally would not put female teachers on the first floor because of
Mhm.
safety concerns. So there is awareness that these things do happen.
Sure.
A lot of Japanese women do not want to rent first floor apartments because there are safety concerns. I'll be very upfront. I have cameras. I have a
Mhm.
door. I have a doorbell camera on my door, and I also have sensor lights on my balcony. So those are precautions that I've taken, not because of my underwear, but just because of safety in general. Um, I have had experiences, I had a phone stalker harassment type issue. And I think
Mhm.
this kind of a segue into sort of like the safety that people talk about, and then, the lack of reporting and the lack of, statistics. People will be like, oh, but statistically, and I'm like, well, when you look at how statistics are taken and you look at police reports, I had a phone, I don't know, stalker, harasser. They got my phone number. I'm assuming it's male. It could have been a woman. I have no idea. Um, but they just started consistently calling me and calling me and calling me to the point where, and it was a landline. So it was, they
Mhm.
kind of know the area that the person is in. And I answered my phone in English. And it got a little bit scary on that, to the point where I would hang my phone up and then it would ring back. And then I would take my phone off the hook for, an hour to 2 hours.
Was there ever any answer on the other side? It was just,
Heavy breathing,
oh.
heavy breathing. I would take my phone off the hook for, an hour or two, and then I would put it back. And then, within 30 seconds, the phone would ring. Um, to the point where, I had my Japanese friends were like, you need to go to the police. So I went to the police. I told them what was happening. They did not take a report. So again, this is where I'm coming in with statistics. They
Yeah,
did not take a report. They were more interested in my identification. They asked for my ID, where I was living, how long I'd been in the country, that kind of info, basic information that, does sort of have some relevance if you were to file a report.
sure.
But no report was taken. And basically what they told me was change phone number.
Mm.
So I contacted NTT. We're talking landline era, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
I contacted NTT and I told them what was happening, thinking maybe they would give me a new number for free. I was charged. It was nearly, I want to say, it was about 5,000 yen to get a new number, but just the hassle of getting a new number, a police report not taken,
Hmm.
that incident it's not recorded anymore. So it's not going to show up in statistics.
Yeah, I've heard the story again and again, especially with stalking cases. The police's response to that is generally, we can't do anything unless they do something
First.
like escalate it beyond the stalking, like
Until there is actual physical violence. If we're looking at relationships, so domestic violence, boyfriend or girlfriend, the police, even if you call the police and they come, they will not really intervene until there is physical violence.
right.
I had another incident when I first moved to Japan, living an apartment building. And there was a situation down the hall from me where a guy was pounding on the door and screaming. And I knew his wife or partner. And they had a baby. And he was pounding on the door and screaming and screaming and screaming. And I called the police. And the police came to my apartment. Even though the man was outside in the
Mhm.
hallway, they came to my apartment and it was like, did you call about something? Like, were you the person that made the phone call about the crazy man down, but they
Great,
wanted to,
call attention to me.
yeah, well, this is it. They put me at risk.
Yeah.
They put me at risk because they then went from my apartment to him.
Hmm.
Um, so they put me at risk.
Yeah. Yeah. Well
But
done,
that
police.
was protocol, I guess. I mean, I don't know. That may have changed. This was in 2001, 2002,
Yeah.
2001. But they came to my apartment first in front of him, and then they went and spoke to him. But he wasn't arrested or anything. I have no idea what happened after that. But I would see him occasionally, through the people or, in the hallway, or like I would be leaving and I would look out, I would open the door and I'd be like, oh, yeah, maybe I won't go out right now. But yeah, unless there is physical violence, the police will not intervene. And speaking with a lawyer recently, regarding a personal situation, I was actually told by a lawyer, quote unquote, sometimes it's just better to get hit because that person can then be arrested for assault and be charged. But that only happens if you go to the police straight away and press charges.
Right.
So for women, if they have stalkers or they have a violent domestic partner in a relationship or whatnot, calling the police, they'll come. They will come, but it will be more of a you're causing meiwaku to the neighborhood. You're being loud. You're disturbing the peace, rather than you're terrifying your girlfriend, your wife, your partner. Rather than that, it's not about that. It's about the neighbors.
Yeah.
So, and
That's
again,
very Japanese.
do these get are there incident logs for these, or are there reports? Are these factoring into the statistics? I have no idea. I wasn't asked to fill out a police report when the police came to see me about the guy that
Unlikely would be my guess, but
exactly.
yeah.
So this is when the statistics of like, well, if you look at violent crimes in Japan or you look at crime rates in Japan, it's very you know
Hmm.
there's a lot of issues there.
Well,
So
let me ask you this: what some people would uh, bring up when it comes to their image of safety in Japan is the two stories that you hear very often are, because you mentioned not only women but also children, is how children in Japan will I mean, really tiny children will be dressed in their school clothes and they're on the train by themselves and they're able to go to and from school on public transportation seemingly safely. And the other one is I've seen interviews on YouTube where
Mhm.
they're interviewing women from America or France or wherever, and they say, "Yeah, I love Japan because I can walk home at 4 a.m. and feel completely safe on the street, and it's amazing because back in, New Jersey, I wouldn't be able to do that." Um, so like when you hear of these seemingly valid examples, like what are we talking about in terms of this perception of safety versus the reality?
When I moved to Japan, I was very similar. I felt very safe and very free. And I could do what I wanted, and I had no problems walking home from a bar inebriated, after having a couple of drinks.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't worry about my physical safety at that point. And I think this is actually a really good um, comment because I don't, it's the whole stranger danger. I don't really think that there is, and this is the same for Canada, the US, women and children are most likely to be violated by people they know.
Mm.
So yeah, there's not the stranger danger aspect of what we feel back home or what we get told about back home. So I felt very safe. But then once you live here, and I feel like once you have, as a woman anyway, you start sharing your experiences of things that have happened, you quickly realize it's not the stranger on the street when you're drunk that's gonna hold you up and take your bag or you. It's your boyfriend or
Right.
your coworker that you went drinking with and then all of a sudden has groped you and then you don't know what to do because then comes that if I make a big deal out of it, I'm going to be seen as the problem or I might ruin his career. And there is a very huge fear in women of being blamed for ending men's careers for men's poor behavior.
We've certainly seen that very thing with the recent retirement of the former SMAP idol
Yeah.
Nakai-san, I think.
That guy, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
who had this um I'm not totally clear on the details, but
Clear in the
on a
details because the details have not been released
right,
because
exactly. And but yeah, it's like I've seen the comments like, well, this, poor guy, he's had his career ruined by this. And
by a woman. She's ruined his career. It's
yeah,
not, oh,
victim
he
blaming,
ruined his
right?
own career. It's the gaslighting and victim blaming, and that is very prevalent. That's very prevalent everywhere.
Hmm.
That's not just a Japan thing, but I think it's taken to a whole new level here. And again, that payout is huge.
Hmm.
I mean, it must have been. I will speculate. It must have been bad for that level of a payout. And the reality is, she will not have been the first person that this has happened to. And for
Hmm.
things like that, I mean, I think if we're going to talk about Johnny's, we also have to acknowledge that lots of young men were assaulted, and this whole, you know, Joshi Mondai that has come up out of this. That's sort of the phrase that has come up in Japan is Joshi Mondai. It's a women's problem, and it's like I don't actually think it's a women's problem. It's a men's problem. It's men are unable to control
Yeah, and
themselves.
for
Men's
anyone
entitlement.
watching who doesn't know what we're
Yeah.
referring to, like Johnny's is the giant, was the giant. I think they've rebranded themselves or split up or something, but like
They rebranded themselves as Smile or something. I'm not sure.
yeah, they're this giant like talent idol agency, and they were in charge of managing and putting together all the big, most famous Japanese boy band groups like SMAP, like Arashi. The list goes on and on. If you've heard of any of these groups, they were probably not all of them, but a lot of them are under this Johnny's company umbrella. And the scandal came out that there was a lot of abuse in there. And so, yeah,
And a
I
lot of
think I
them
think
will
that's
be
a good point. It's
victims.
not just women. It's people in power abusing those who are not.
Yeah.
Um,
Generally men.
I do
Generally
want to
men in
go.
power.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, let's be specific.
To go back to, you talked about the kids on a train.
Yeah.
You know, all kids, generally, my understanding is that every elementary school child in this country gets an alarm. The school gives them alarm when they hit grade one.
Yeah,
So
that's true. That's true. They
if
all
there are
have
not
that
issues,
little
if there are not
pull
issues with
pull tab
safety for
thing.
children, if there are
Mhm.
not issues with safety for children, why are we giving them alarms?
Yeah.
Why are there neighborhood watch programs set up? And I'm not saying that these programs and giving kids alarms are bad. But I think for anybody who has lived in Japan long enough, we know, as a mass generalization on my part, Japan is reactive. Japan is
Hmm.
not proactive.
Hmm.
So these alarms, the neighborhood watch, the homes that the kids can go to if they get into trouble, this is not from somebody sitting down thinking, "Hey, this is a great idea." This is going to be reactive because situations have happened, and this says, fairly enough, it has been widespread in Japan, and I support that. But you mentioned kids traveling on the train and whatnot. A lot of the times that I see, they're boys,
Hmm.
um, and I do think that Japan is very good in watching out for small children. Um, but I mean, we know, the Center Shiken, which was held a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
that is the biggest grope day in Japan. That is
Uh,
the biggest day, that's the day that the police are so overwhelmed with reports of men groping high school girls on the train because men know that these young women are taking a once in a lifetime test
mhm.
to secure their future to get into a university. And so there are packs of men, there's communities online of men agreeing to meet at stations and go and grope these high school girls who are, expected to wear their school uniforms. They're marked targets.
Mhm.
Um,
And they don't, the idea there is that they have to go take this test, so they're not going to take the
report.
time to complain and go to the police because then their future is compromised.
Exactly. And again, if these women, young women did, I mean, they're children, they're underage, so I guess I should not call them young women, but ch children.
Hmm.
Um, if they go and report it, um, they lose the opportunity to study, to take this test. Again, it's held once a year. Are there retakes? I don't know enough about this to comment on that.
I don't think
But
so.
generally speaking, these girls are like, nope, go. Push it down, push it aside, go where I'm going, go in and take the test. Because they're not going to let that incident ruin the rest of their lives,
Just
for university.
just last night, the news was doing, I think it was a 10 to 15 minute whole segment where they were following these undercover officers on trains, tracking these guys who were clearly like looking for targets, and so uh they would basically get onto the same train car with them, and when the man
Right.
made a move, they would nab him. And also on escalators as well, people trying to take photos
Right.
of upskirt and that kind of
I mean,
thing.
I can honestly, I can say I have never, knock on wood, I have not been groped on a train. I've
Hmm.
never been groped on a train. I have been approached for threesomes. I have been asked, I know, yeah, two
Yes.
guys,
I remember you telling this story. I think it was in Nagoya when we met. You were you
yeah,
were telling like
two
the weird
guys,
propositions you've
guys
gotten.
just propositioning me to go to a love hotel and have a threesome, and me, the fear that women have is we just can't laugh at these guys, right? So I had to be like, oh, I have a boyfriend, because that was the first thing that comes to my mind. Was a lot of times these kinds of men do not, they don't care about my autonomy of like, no, I don't want to have a threesome with you. It was, oh, I have a boyfriend, and they were like, oh, he won't mind. And I was just like,
Hmm.
I think my non-existent boyfriend would mind, you know. Um,
Yeah.
so I've sat next to guys who are more than happy to open up porn, either a porn magazine, we're talking back in the day, um, or porn on their phone. I've absolutely had that happen. But as for being groped, no, I've not actually been groped on the train, but I have been groped elsewhere. I've been propositioned. Um, going to meet friends, jeans and flip-flop and t-shirt, and some guy coming up asking me how much I am for an hour.
Mm.
And I'm just like, wait, what? And then it clicked in my head like what he was actually, because I was like, hey Kyla, like what is
You want an English lesson? Like,
I mean my jeans and flip-flops are
yeah. Mm.
yeah, it's and like that happened. And I think I might have been 22 or 23 at the time, and I was going to a bar and I was meeting some of my friends in for drinks. And I walked in the bar and I was like, you guys are never gonna guess what happened. And I told them, and it was just pretty much half of them had had similar experiences. And it was like it was one of those things that if I hadn't been going to meet my friends at that point, I don't know if I would have remembered later to be like, oh, by the way, I was propositioned. They think
Mhm.
I'm. And before anybody gets upset, I'm not disregarding that job. I am very much sex work is work.
Mhm.
As long as women have the autonomy to make the decision to engage in it or not engage in it.
Right.
Sex trafficking in this country is huge, huge. Number two after Russia, I believe. So
Mm.
there's a lot of women in this country who are not sex workers. They are sex slaves. So
Yeah.
let's just get that clear.
And even like the recent news that has covered this issue is talked about areas in no, Shinjuku, where these women are in super like crazy amounts of debt and are just working in completely unsafe conditions on the street because they're being forced to pay
Legalize
extortionate
it.
amounts of money. And
Legalize it.
yeah,
Legalize it. Give them health care. Give them pensions. Make it safe. But
yeah.
people
I
in
mean,
power don't do
there
that.
is that to a certain extent in Japan, I understand, but yeah, there's a lot of underground stuff as well, for sure. Now, it's funny because we were talking about two types of issue like violence here, which is the people you know versus the people you don't know. But it seems like you have had the experiences, obviously, with people you don't know, um, and the reactionary stuff you mentioned, like giving alarms to children, etc. I was thinking as you were saying that I'm a member of a line group
Mhm.
that is put out by my city ward, and they put out announcements, and I there's announcements all the time. Like there's a
Some
man
guy tried to get small
asking
child into a car.
elementary school weird questions, or like a dude exposed himself to a high school girl on this street corner in this area, blah blah blah. And it's like it's actually relatively frequent, and that's
Common.
the
It's
purpose of the
very
line group
common.
is to bring this
It's
out.
very common. It's the same. We've just recently moved, but in our old neighborhood, constantly, man shows knife to small children. Uh, Man screams and chases after children saying he's going to kill them. This isn't like once every 6 months. This
Yeah.
is once every 2 weeks we're getting a message that this has happened. And
I
I think it's great that we're getting those messages.
yeah.
It creates awareness. I don't know if those groups exist in, where I'm from in Canada. I don't know if those line groups, well, like probably not line, but an email group or whatnot exists in Canada. But it was really eye-opening for me,
Mhm.
just how prevalent it was. And that was one of the things that I did want to mention today was, when I was not a mom, so I'm a mom now, obviously. No, I'm a mom. After having a child, I became a lot more aware of a lot of this stuff.
Right.
Because before it was like worry about your own personal safety, but now I have somebody else to worry about as
Hmm.
well. And the just how prevalent these kinds of things are. My son has an iPhone. He doesn't have a Kodomo Keitai, and the reason why is because I want the GPS. I
Hmm.
want to be able to open up my phone and stalk where my child is. I
Right.
want to know
Right.
where he is. Before he had a phone, he had an air tag.
Hmm.
He had an air tag on a school bag. He had an air tag on, he goes to Kumon. He had an air tag on his Kumon bag. He had an air tag. Just
Yeah.
maybe it is a false sense of security, but I will take a false sense of security over just anxiety. But
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I really I didn't know a lot about children's safety until I had my own. And then it was really eye-opening to get those messages.
I think that makes a lot of sense because if your image of child safety in Japan is just because or is just that you see kids on the train by themselves and so it must be super safe. Yeah, wait until you have one. I mean, I can say the exact same thing with the
And
alarm,
those
the
kids on the
bad.
train are that's not normal. So, like we got to make an awareness of that as well. Those kids on a train are traveling to elite private schools.
Hmm.
Those are not the everyday demographics. And that's not to say that the everyday demographics deserve anything. But it's not normal. It's rare. So you
Hmm.
will end up seeing these kids traveling on trains. Yeah, you'll see these little kids, but those are not average kids. Your average kids are walking. And your average kids walk in groups. And I think that's another thing that needs to be brought up. Why does Japan have the group walk? Again, because it is safer.
Yeah.
So this belief of like Japan is, the land of milk and honey and safety.
Hmm.
Why are non-Japanese promoting this when Japanese themselves are aware, which is why, there's the women only train care. There's, the kids are walking in groups, the kids have these alarms. Um, And again, as I've said, if anybody spends long enough time in Japan, we know that it's not necessarily, it's not really a proactive country. It's a reactionary country. So
Hmm.
this is a reaction to situations that have happened. And I'm not saying that it's bad, but to go on and on and on about Japan being a safe country, yeah, if you're a man,
Yeah, and you all, I will probably inevitably get a comment or two in the comment
absolutely.
section about, oh, at least you don't have to worry about the school shooting or da 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 da.
Absolutely, that's going to come up.
Yeah,
Somebody's going to say that,
it's
and I'm going to be like, apples and oranges. Guess what? Kids in Canada
yeah,
don't really They're not really
you
scared
can't
about.
compare.
We don't have, active shooting drills in Canada that I know of.
Mhm.
Yeah, to compare Japan to the US with gun control, I mean, honestly, sorry, but America.
Well, it's what
Sort your
about it?
shit
It's
out.
like,
Sorry, am I allowed to
well,
swear? Sort it out. Sort your gun control laws out. If you're up in arms about school shooting, then demand better from your government because that's an American problem.
yeah,
To compare that to every other nation no,
doesn't make any sense, right?
doesn't make any sense. So don't bring up school shooting in this. I will come for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, exactly. And I think it's also important to know, that it's it's like you mentioned that these these issues are, is there anyone out there keeping stats on, the number of people who've pulled up in a van and asked elementary school children weird questions? Like,
Yeah.
probably not. I don't, there's probably not anyone compiling that data, and so you
No.
don't see that if you're looking for
And
statistics.
again, to get reports taken, I'll give you an example of a situation at work.
Okay.
I used to teach in a different city, and there was a group of female professors, and we would all sit together, and it was mixed. It was non-Japanese and Japanese. And I started doing Joshikais. This was a long time ago, but I started doing Joshikais before I had my son, when I had a little more freedom. And I
Hmm.
was putting events together for female university professors to meet and network and maybe, just get to know people, work on some research and whatnot. So I was putting these events together. And one of the women came up to me and she said, I really appreciate that you're doing this. And she said, can I ask you, a situation happened. And she was like, can I ask what you think I should do? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. What's going on? And she had gone to an NKai. And this was, not a young woman, like my age now. So, this was maybe 15 years ago. She was probably in her 40s, Japanese woman, doctor, had research grants, just a really amazing person, highly educated, highly, highly educated, great English, wasn't teaching in English, she was sociology. And
Hmm.
she said that she went to an NKai, a school NKai for her department, Bone NKai or NKai. And the dean groped her. And she was shocked, um, didn't really know what to do, but she just thought, nah, I'm going to report this. So she reported it to the university. And the university was like, oh, that's not our problem. You were off campus. So you need to go to the police.
Hmm.
So she went to the police. And the police basically said, well, we're not going to do anything about it. That's a university problem. Do you have witnesses? And this was a couple of days after it happened. So it was like, do you have witnesses? You didn't come right away. There's nothing that we can do. Go
Right.
back to the university. So she went back to the university and she was a part-time professor at that point. And she went to the office. I'm not quite sure what office that she went to. She went, might have been HR or whatever. Um, and one of the secretaries there pulled her aside and said, "Look, are you sure you want to do this? You're part-time. He's the dean.
Hmm.
You need to think about what you're doing, and you need to think about whether this is going to be worth it for you." And she left. She didn't pursue it, but then, she came to me and she said, like, well, what would you do?
What did you
And,
say?
I think it's such a different perception now that I'm older and now that I've had various experiences. Before I was like, yeah, you should report him. You should report him. And I was very like, down with him. Now that I'm older, now that I have a child to look after and it's not just about me,
Mhm.
for her financial reasons, it's probably safer she didn't. It's very easy to get blacklisted. Very,
Mhm.
very easy to get blacklisted in academia in Japan, in
Right.
certain schools, whatever your job is. So she, in the end, I was like, oh, I'll go with you. I said, if you want me to go with you, I'll go with you. I will stay with you. And in the end, she decided not to, and I supported that. I was like, it's your decision, but if you want to go, I'll go with you. And in the end, she just decided, yeah, no, I'm not going to report him. But then she didn't go to any more Enkais. She didn't go
Right.
to any more drinking parties. So that affects her networking. It affects her research possibilities. It affects her getting, tenure at another place that she could have met, another professor who was working adjunct at this university and was out, just the
Right.
knock-on effect. And this guy did nothing happened to him. Nothing happened to him. The university wouldn't take it seriously, and the police wouldn't take it seriously. So you get a lot of a lot of comments from men who were like, well, Japanese women should, and it's like, why are you holding women accountable to report instead of holding men accountable to not be predators?
Hmm.
So again, that's where the victim blaming comes in. Same university. Um, I I brought this up. I brought this up in a meeting, and there was some chuckles from people, not as in like a ha ha ha, kind of like it was more of a like, and I
Hmm.
learned that they had a professor on staff who had groped, or but like, can we just not even call it grope? Grope, it's assault.
Hmm.
Assaulted two other female professors and a student. And they were sort of dissuaded from going to the police to make a report. And again, even if they did make a report, are the police going to do anything? Um, he was a union member,
Hmm.
and the university decided that it was going to cost them more money to try and get rid of him than it was to just keep him on staff. No classes, no classes, no committees, no nothing. He had his office, but he got a salary, and that was his punishment. And they told me about that. And I just sat there and thought, so wait, he's a university professor. He's kept his title. He's got his office. He keeps his research budget. He keeps his salary. He doesn't do committee work and he doesn't teach. That's incentive.
That is nuts.
Yeah.
I could see why you got the nervous laughter when you brought it up because
Yeah.
that's
And
the
the thing too
policy,
was the thing too was when this was happening, we were undergoing a 2 hour harassment seminar.
which is why you bring it up, right?
Which is why I brought it up, which is why I was like, okay, so what's going to happen with the adjunct? Like, and so I explained this and I said, so we're sitting here through a 2 hour seminar, we're listening to this, and now you're now telling me about this guy, and again, I'm sure that the 2 hour seminar was a reaction because of this man, but
Hmm.
this man was still on campus because it was cheaper for the university to keep it. And again, they don't want it in the news.
Right.
Got to understand that anytime anything happens, and I'm speaking about universities because this is my field of research. They do not want this information in the news, so it's just
Reputation is everything.
squish it,
Yeah.
squish it. Um, but
Yeah,
I
that
can't
was.
imagine that those two female faculty members and the student were really happy with that, you know. And I don't know. I'm not going to speculate about a payout or whatnot, but if you we want to go back to what happened with the SMAP guy, you know,
Mhm.
that payout, there is hush money given. Hush money is highly acceptable here, and that's what it is. People are like, oh, well, no, it's a settlement. It's hush money.
Right.
Charges do not get filed. There is no police report. It's keep it quiet. Here's the money. Be quiet. It is hush money. I don't want to call it a settlement.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it that way, that incident with the SMAP guy is
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
it's not part of the statistics. It's not an
No,
official thing.
no, no, no. It's
It's a
not
big scandal. It's on TV, but it's not going to show up in the stats.
same with Johnny's, I believe. I mean, there was payouts all over the place for that, but I don't believe he was ever I mean, this all came out after he died, didn't he? I can't remember.
I don't. I'm. I try to
I
deliberately
know,
avoid all
same.
news regarding idols. So.
I mean, you have to look at the wording as well, I'm going to go there. Comfort women,
Hmm.
sex slaves.
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is. Oh, they provided comfort for lonely men. No, they were sex slaves. There is a history in war of any country, but particularly in Japan, of using women for the purpose of, male entitlement, male sexual needs, and they victims. And
Hmm.
calling them comfort women does such a discredit to the horrors that those women suffered. But you embed that into society and an acceptance of what happened to those women by the language that you use.
Right.
Woman was assaulted, man assaulted. We've had this conversation before, where
Yeah.
you put that verb and the noun and man assaults women, man assaulted woman. Why are we not clear on what this is? It's,
Right.
a lot in the,
Why are we eliminating the subject in the passive sentence?
well, why is it passive?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is it passive? You know, woman killed by husband. No, man killed. Like,
Wife. Right.
like, oh.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yes.
Um, so we've spoken quite a bit on the safety issue. There's one other thing that we obviously have to bring up, and I think it's actually more directly in line with your expertise because we started talking about issues happening in the university.
Mhm.
And I know you spent a lot of time studying, learning, getting really familiar with the issues of gender discrimination when it comes to work. And one of the things you talked about with this part-time teacher that you mentioned is reminds me of probably a conversation with you, could have been with someone else, but how expectations of um, you mentioned her ability to be able to network and things like that. And you were talking about your own situation of doing Joshikais. That was when you were not married yet and had a lot more time. And so
Yeah.
the conversation I remember was talking about how there's this sort of, I'm going to use this term, I'm sure it's not the right term, but kind of soft discrimination in that
Mhm.
men will go out to have drinks together and network, and the women who have families have more of a pressure to go home and take care of the children, and so they miss out on those opportunities. It's one of those silent, when people think of gender discrimination in the job, they're thinking immediate like salary gap, like men are being paid more and women are being paid
I
less.
think just blatant, yeah, just blatant in your face, but
Yeah, but a
it's
lot of it is not in your face. A lot of it is just lack of opportunities because
gender norms.
yeah, gender norms, exactly.
Yep, yep.
And I think those gender norms are still particularly strong in Japan.
Mhm.
And I think where one of the places where you'll find this kind of divide in the argument is that some people will say that, well, in Japan, women are still much more interested in keeping that traditional role and being the one who raises the family. And the women who want to have a career are able to do so. So what's the problem here? How do you respond to that?
Like inhale. Um, okay. All right. So here's where I will be very open and honest in that before having a child, was completely unaware of all of this, and I was an absolute pick me. It was a pick me. I had no understanding of the that's not true. I mean, I had an understanding of what it takes to raise a child and be a mom, and I babysat. I have, I have nieces, I have nephews. It just, but it wasn't as is in my face.
Right.
And when I was child free, I was able to go for drinks. I was able to network. I was a pick me. I was the token girl. I was out with the guys and you know, we've known each other for a long time. I worked in publishing. I did sales. My job was to know everybody. And everybody needed to know me because that's how my career was built at that time.
Right.
Um, and I was completely unaware of the privilege at that point, to be honest, of being in a sales position related to education. And, I was a party planner. I would get university teachers together and I would do book looks and we'd go for drinks and I met so many amazing people who had these amazing ideas and amazing research. And I still have those connections because I was in that room at that time.
Hmm.
Um, as a mother now, very rarely am I in that room. Um, my career and the opportunities that I have had in my career, I was able to make those when I was child free. If I was starting my career in academia now as a mother, I am lucky. I'm on my second tenure position. I was lucky enough to get one tenure position. And I will be very blatant. Am I qualified? Yeah. Are there more qualified people than me? Absolutely. Are there better people than me? Yeah. Am I better than a lot of other people who applied for these positions? Absolutely. But my networking was um, key to my success. What
Hmm.
has been my success and will be my future success is knowing people, knowing people who are in job interviews willing to vouch for me. And I think
Hmm.
that there is a situation where we do need to discuss the old boys club. There absolutely is a boys club. Um, Networking reinforces that boys club. So when you have women who are unable to network for various reasons, it might be they have kids, they might have somebody else that they need to look after. Um, Being able to go to these events, if we're speaking about conferences and whatnot,
Hmm.
it is a privilege to be able to have the research funds or university money
Right.
to use that to go to these events. And there's not a lot of discussion on that. We know that networking, well, actually, I do have a paper on this, but um, it's a privilege, and that privilege is often not afforded to women because of the old boys club and the hiring that happens. And if you get a bunch of Japanese women together and they're in charge of hiring, they're likely to hire a Japanese woman. You get
Hmm.
a bunch of Japanese men together and they're on a hiring committee, they're likely to hire a Japanese man. You get a bunch of white women, we're going to hire what is representative to what you know. And this is where, I'm not trying to get into American politics or whatnot right now, but diversity, equity, inclusion is huge. And then it becomes this, in my career, I don't know how many times I was told by white men, um, you only got hired because they needed a woman. Um, There's a lot of research on this. There's a lot of rage from majority males. And I want to, for this conversation, I want to get away from the Western centric white man as we're in Japan. So the
Yeah.
problem in this country is not white men. The problem in this country is Japanese men. So people can be upset, don't come for me, but they could be upset, but I'm going to use majority men because this issue, the misogyny and the issue and discrimination, xenophobia, racism, whatever we want to talk about is majority male for whatever country that is. And let's add straight majority male.
Hmm.
Um, so you end up having these groups who hire what they are comfortable with, which is their representation. So, you historically, Japanese men were the ones who were hiring white men because they needed people to fulfill the roles of English teachers. These white guys end up getting in power to be able to hire. Who are they going to hire? They're going to hire more white guys.
So Japanese men hired you because they knew you from your networking and from who you knew.
Nope.
Is that what is that?
No, I got hired uh for my first tenure position. I got hired just because of the networking. I have everything to back it up, and I will say that women have got to be twice as good to be given half the credit.
Hmm.
I had connections with a couple of guys on the hiring committee who were friends who had professional relationships with Japanese people on the hiring committee.
Right.
So, I was lucky.
Hmm.
Well, I don't like luck makes it sound like I didn't do the work, but I did have people in my corner. Um, and I am grateful for that. But I networked my butt off for that. And that's not to say that other men also don't network their butts off as well. But when you look around the room and if you're looking at who's on the hiring committees and you don't see you represented, it's for my
Okay.
second position, the position that I'm in now, um, networked. And it was a woman who said, "Hey, we've got this job opening. I think you'd be perfect. I can't guarantee you, but I would really love for you to throw your hat in the ring." And, her reaching out to me, because again, you've got to look at a lot of women. There's statistics on this, and I'm gonna make up a statistic off the spot. But it's something like men will apply for jobs that they're 50% qualified for. I could find it.
Ah,
Men
okay.
apply for jobs that they're 50% qualified for.
Hmm.
For women, it's like 80 to 90%. If they don't have 80 to 90% in the criteria listed for the job ad, they're not going to apply.
Hmm.
And so when you have people encouraging women to say, "Hey, I think you would be good for this," they're more likely to apply.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so that comes up where, like where the networking is. And I look at my history, my work history. I have been very blessed. One of the reasons why I'm saying this is because a lot of the times when I have this discussion with men or men know about me and they know about my research, it's very much like, oh, she's a feminazi. She's one of them. She hates men. And that's not the case at all. I have had a lot of amazing men in my life support my career and open doors for me. And I feel very blessed for that. But again, I've networked and I've been lucky to be able to find these men who have opened doors for me. And I think you will find that when women get into these positions, they're more willing to open doors for other women. But it's not just enough to have a seat at the table. You've also got to be given the mic.
So,
And a lot of times women don't get the mic passed to them.
well, that's the question I want to ask next, which is, aside from not ha from finding themselves excluded from old boys club, not being able to have the same access to networking, what are some other
A hiring
less
track? You want to
less
talk about the hiring
less
track?
blatant ways that women are
Oh,
disadvantaged?
absolutely. So, when you look at and again, I'm talking about academia in this one for universities, but women are at the bottom rungs. Women are at the bottom rungs and it comes back to like oh, the gender gap in pay is not real. It absolutely is. You get hired at the same time as a man. A man is going to get put on a career track, whereas women are not going to necessarily get put on the career track. When you talk about Japanese companies, um, there's sort of like I can't remember what the name is. It's like Ippan track and then like the regular like mommy tracked. You get mommy tracked. And that's a prevalent term in English, that you get mommy tracked. So it's men are expected to be dedicated to the company. And when you look at the gender roles here and childcare and who's doing all the domestic labor and things like that. Sorry, not all of the domestic labor, but the majority of the domestic labor.
The stats easily bear that out. Like,
The gaslighting that I wash the dishes and it's like
you want a cookie?
have a cookie.
Yeah.
Exactly. I worked, I bought that. I went to the store, I bought that cookie. I put that cookie in the cupboard. I've washed the plates for that. I've given you the cookie, but you want kudos because you have after you've eaten the cookie, you've washed the plate from the cookie that you ate.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing. The
Oh,
gaslighting on
wow.
it's so prevalent. It's so prevalent. Um, but you end up with, two equally qualified people. Let's say you start off with two recent university graduates. They graduate from the same program, same capabilities, same whatever. The man will be promoted much faster.
Hmm.
The woman might just be hired as an office lady anyway. But the man is supposed to be, career. He will get the options, for business trips. He'll get the training. There's so much research on this in terms of like English language investment in Japanese male versus Japanese female, because they expect the men to go abroad to do the business trips.
Hmm.
So you get all of these opportunities for the men, and then the women stay at a lower position. And then, this whole like, there's no such thing as a pay gap. It's the ranking is different, but no one ever takes a look at to why the rankings are different.
Yeah,
And
it's not like the two people have the exact same job and the pay is different. That's
and
that's
the
not what's
women
happening.
don't get the same opportunities.
Right.
You know,
It's about
we
advancement and the type of job track that
Yeah,
you're in.
absolutely.
Um,
And the
I
tracks are very different.
I have to ask though, because going back to what I said a little while ago about, is it the possibility, and I'm going to give you an example of this. Is it the possibility though that many of the women intend to be mommies and therefore are on a mommy track because it's by choice? And
Absolutely.
I always think of the example I always think of is I've taught a lot of nursing students in my university, and it's just part of the communication activities we've done. It comes up like, what is your image for your career? Where do you think you'll be working in the future? Da 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 da. And there is always like a sizable percentage of them who are saying, well, I want to work for 10 years, get married, and retire.
Yeah.
That's what they've already decided they're going to do.
As
So,
a feminist, I support that. That's their decision. If they can make those decisions in life to ensure their financial security and their
mhm.
safety and the safety of their children, who am I to judge?
So,
Uh,
so how does a woman who doesn't want that keep themselves from being mommy tracked? Or I mean, how does that work?
if I had the answer for that. I think
You'd
choose
have you'd have a award-winning line of
I
self-help books.
would just, here's what I will say. I don't think any of us have the answer for that. There are certainly precautions that women can take. Um, choose your company wisely.
Mhm.
And by company, I mean your employer, but also company around you.
Right.
You can change the people around you, but you can't change the people around you. Um, for women who want to have careers, holy hell, choose your partner wisely. I'm in the middle of that one. To not get so into a personal note, uh, if you are a woman who wants to succeed in Japan and have a high flying career, you probably should remain single,
Mm.
unfortunately. Um, I
Well,
don't think a lot of men have, I'm gonna get killed for this. Um, I don't think a lot of men are as progressive as they want to believe they are. And when women start making more money or having a better career, things fall apart. Not for everybody. Again, I'm generalizing. But if you want to have a marriage and kids, somebody's career's got to take the back seat. Because if somebody's career does not take the back seat, it's not going to work. So you need to
And the
have
man is going to expect that the woman's career will take the back seat.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't think this is necessarily a Japan thing either. I mean, you're seeing a lot of women who are choosing to remain single. You've got the 4B movement in Korea that's taken off, like no sex, no dating, no relate no, no, Um women are they're gonna come for me. Women are most often single by choice. Men are not single by choice.
Hmm.
Yeah, think about that one.
I, I don't
There's
know.
a
I mean,
lot of
that
women.
for me
And
that
again,
tracks, but
these are generalizations. I'm not saying every man, because I'm sure there's going to be like, I'm single by choice.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
generalization. We're seeing a movement of women who are looking at the dating pool and looking at what men have to offer and are saying, nah, I'm going to
Yeah.
focus on my career. I'm going to focus on my financial security.
But
Um,
do you see that movement taking wing in Japan as well, though? Because I
I
mean,
think
what you're
part of the
mentioning
po-
is
I think part of the population decline is very much a lot of Japanese women. I think it's a silent revolution. They're not talking about it. They're
right.
not talking about it outwardly. But
Right.
you get my girlfriends and we got some drinks. We're
Mhm.
talking about it. I have a lot
Yeah.
of
I mean,
incredible Japanese female friends who are single by choice,
yeah.
single mothers by choice, um, married but no children.
And there you can bring up the stats that do exist that show, less dating, less marriage, and thereby less children. So it's.
And it doesn't make sense to me in terms of like, one of the big issues that men complain about is like, oh, I'm the breadwinner and it's so much pressure and I'm so stressed out. And I've had men say to me, like, you don't understand, you're a woman, you have no idea, what it's like to have this kind of pressure to raise a family and to be expected to make all the money. And I'm like, well, actually, I lived alone. Before getting married, I did have those financial pressures. Um, what? Um, Part of that too is for men, and this is what I don't understand is, happy wife, happy life. If you marry a career-driven woman and you are not taking on your fair share of the domestic labor, she doesn't need to stay with you. She's financially independent,
Mhm.
so she can leave. And what we're seeing now is women are leaving. The divorce rates are increasing. So we've got women who are leaving these marriages. We've got women who are refusing to date. And you have men who are very angry at women because you know what? It's always like, well, women should pick better. We are. We are now picking better. And,
Well,
and men don't have the financial stronghold on us anymore. And so, in previous generations, it was women kind of needed to get married to have financial security. And men were not necessarily likable, but they didn't need to be likable. And now men need to be likable. And y'all be struggling with that. Again,
so
as a generalization.
there is well there's two things I want to bring up, and I think I
You're
just
like, oh my
I think I
goodness,
just forgot the
so
first
many.
one. Um, oh yeah, yeah. The first one was you could say that this is like a generation thing of young women who are silently
Mhm.
having a revolution. But actually, even before this, there was a very common phenomenon in Japan of divorce after
Yep.
retirement. Like the man would
Once the
retire
pension has
and
been
then
secured. Yep.
be in the
Yep.
house, and the
Silver
wife,
haired.
I can't
Yep.
stand this person, and they would divorce at like age 65 or 70 or whatever it was. Uh,
Think about COVID. COVID. COVID divorce rates skyrocketed. Domestic
hmm.
violence. So this is not talked about, but domestic violence in Japan skyrocketed during
Hmm.
COVID. Abuse of children, child abuse skyrocketed because you had people, the husband was not at work or the wife, was not at work, and you had the families living together and in the house. Yeah, so, retirement, divorce, because again, the generalization, Japanese men, and I guess we could say men in general, focus on their careers. They do not have the social networks that women have.
Hmm.
Um, Particularly in Japan, where you do have, an older generation of women who have left work, stayed home, looked after the children. They have amazing social networks. They go out and, they meet their friends, they do ikebana, they do whatever. Men go to work, they hit retirement age, they have not fostered their friendships. They have work friends, but you retire from work, that community kind of disappears. So
Hmm.
you end up with men who basically follow their wives around, and the wives are like, go get a life, go find a hobby, leave me alone, you're driving me crazy. But these men also are not necessarily participating in housework. So before it was like, well, I can't cook and clean and do all of this because I'm at work. And then they retire and they are pretty much useless.
Yeah.
And women are fed up. So yeah, the divorce rates skyrocket because these women do not want to spend the rest of their lives as a domestic labor slave to a man who is driving them crazy.
Now I've
I'm not going to
heard.
make friends on this one, am I?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna give you one of the common pushbacks for the dating thing and finding quality man, which is there's definitely a perception. I this is not my area of study. I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to this. So I'm and I'm not trying to make any friends or any enemies through this, but the one of the arguments I've heard is that there's an issue with um, unrealistic expectations towards men, in that now that women are
Superman
making the
in
same amount of
finance,
money as
like
men,
with blue
women
eyes.
still want the man who's 6'6" and is going to be the CEO, and that pool of men that are better than the position that women have put themselves into is very small, and so coupling is not happening because
Right.
of too high of expectations.
Are the expectations too high or just men not raising the bar like we have?
Well, for me, it just seems like a no-brainer that if you have two people in the house that work, then like for example, domestic chores should be equal. Like that doesn't make
And
any
they
sense.
work.
That
Yeah. But domestic labor is work, like the whole housewife,
yeah.
she doesn't work. She doesn't have a job. I'm the one who goes out and makes the money. And it's like, okay, she doesn't have a job that pays her for the labor that she does, but
Hmm.
your promotions and your ability to go and do a business trip for 2 weeks and you make sure that your kids are fed and looked after, that's her job. It's just not recognized in a financial situation. And so you get a lot of men who
Why is that so
don't
devalued?
recognize it
Why is that so devalued though? Because you also have men who take on
because
the
men
role
don't
of
value
house
women's
husband, and
work.
they're kind of looked down on by other men, like, oh, you're a house
Men
husband.
don't value women's work. That's why.
Hmm.
That's why. That brings you into toxic masculinity. If you have, stay-at-home dads and men are like, "Oh, he's not a real man." These conversations come up and it's like, well, women are always the ones who say, "Boys don't cry," and I don't want a weak man. I honestly don't know any woman who I haven't had women say those comments in front of me.
Hmm.
I'm sure those women exist. It's the same thing with domestic violence and, men are victims too. And it's like, absolutely. I'm not going to deny that. But when you start looking at the statistics of these things, that's whataboutism, and it's they're completely different situations. A man hitting a woman versus a woman hitting a man, and the damage that can be caused. That's not to say that damage is not caused, but men do not value women's work. They do not value domestic labor. They do not value child care. They don't value it. So you end up having a society where, I think that there's a lot of men who would love to spend more time with their kids, but don't, because of restrictions within the office or fear that they are going to somehow be labeled as less than a man. And that is not coming, I think, necessarily from women. I think there is an issue absolutely of, I know a couple of guys who have been stay-at-home dads, or, not who are the primary parent, not the primary worker.
Hmm.
And there have been conversations of like, well, the moms groups don't like me and I'm not welcome by the moms groups. And it's like, well, no shit. Your needs and our needs are very different. You can't expect as a father who is the primary parent, who is a stay-at-home dad, to necessarily be welcomed with open arms into a mom's group, because the dynamics are different. There's a lot of different dynamics happening there. But I
Hmm.
don't think that you would find moms groups actively speaking ill about these stay-at-home dads and not supportive of dads groups. Just because we're not like, oh, look, a dad come, it's the accolades that also a lot of men seem to want when, the performative parenting.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, weekend daddy syndrome in Japan is huge. Oh, he's such a good dad. He took his kid to the park. Oh, he's such a good dad. He takes him to Kumon. Oh, he's such a good dad. He made the bento. Ah,
There's
where's our
that golf
accolades for
clap.
the work that we do consistently? So I think, a lot of the times when these men kind of say, I've been rejected by the moms groups, it's like, well, if you're expecting a parade to be thrown for you, that's why. We don't like your kind. Whereas if you've got, the dads that are just like, just get on with it, because that's what moms do. We just get on with it. Um, it's one of those things where, I've worked with non-Japanese men who really, you know, it's Taco Tuesday. It's my turn to make dinner. Hey, Tanya, did you hear that? I make dinner every Tuesday. And I'm literally like, I don't know.
Congrats.
Yeah. But then they seem, if we have this kind of a conversation and I'm like, I don't like, what do you want me to say? Congratulations, or
Yeah.
wow, your wife is sure is lucky.
Yeah.
I'm not going to
What is
give
my
that
reaction
to you.
supposed to be? Like,
Yeah, I'm not going to give that to you because that's my life. And I managed to hold down a full-time job. I managed to do the same job that you do, plus more. So where's my accolades? Where's my parade? Instead, I'm vilified for needing to go pick my child up from daycare or school because he's got a fever. I'm vilified for leaving early.
right.
I can remember situations when my son was really little and in daycare, and I used to leave um, quite early being 4 o'clock. And I got my work done. I was publishing, I was researching, I didn't have Kaken, but I was doing stuff. And one of my coworkers, looked at his watch and he was like, ah, it must be nice to be able to leave so early. I hope you can go home and have a relaxing night. And I was like, I'm going grocery shopping. And then after going grocery shopping, I'm going to pick my child up from daycare. And then I am going to attempt to deal with his tiredness after daycare while making dinner. And then I'm going to feed him. And then my husband is going to come home to a hot meal and give him a bath. And then while he's giving him the bath, I am just going to sit down and be like, and then my husband is going to use the bath button, the call button, to be like, hey, he's done. Can you get him? So I'm going to go upstairs. Our bathtub was upstairs. I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to get our child. I'm going to bring him down. I'm the one who's now diapers, pajamas, brush teeth. My husband's in his bath relaxing. And then he's going to come down and then he'll put him to bed. But when you listen to people talk about like, your husband gives him a bath and puts him to bed every night? It's gay. I'm literally like, the idea that I am somehow not as effective in my job or I'm screwing over my company because I'm leaving at 4 o'clock instead of 5. Never mind that I worked through lunch.
Hmm.
You know, again, it's quality versus quantity. And we all know that Japan loves the idea of men staying late at night at work and working hard.
Right.
Working long hours does not mean you are effective. And the men are able to stay those long hours because there is a wife at home looking after the children for them.
Right.
And that is not recognized in society. And, for women who want to stay home and do that, I applaud them. That is not, the stay-at-home mom type. I was never that person. Um,
Mhm.
it is hard. It is hard. Like, I wanted to go back to work so I could have a hot coffee, you know? And
Just,
then you do get there is the shading of internalized misogyny that comes from other women who did not make the same choices as you did. The mommy wars is a thing. And
mm,
I can honestly say I have in my career and as a parent, I have never had a Japanese man that I do not know ever question my work ethic or ever question my parenting choices. But I have certainly had a lot of Japanese women and, other women and non-Japanese men comment. So, with daycare, my son went to daycare at 6 months. I took 6 months off. And it was like, aren't you worried about him being lonely? Aren't you worried about him getting sick? You're going to miss his first steps. You're going to miss his first words. And I was just like, why are you saying this to me? Why, you do you, boo. Like, I'm not going to judge you. I mean, but different women want different situations. And, when we talk about sexism, we've also got to acknowledge the fact that men often do not have the opportunity to make that choice. And one of the reasons why we go back to it, see, I'm circling back. um, Women and men do not get given the same opportunities at work.
mhm.
So we go back to the gender gap differences in pay. You like how I sum that up?
Yeah. Well done.
Men, if men are suffering from the burden of overwork and being sole financial providers, they should become feminists so that the men that come after them have the opportunity of staying home and working less with their kids and they can support, their career-driven wife or their
Yeah,
career-driven
exactly.
partner.
The 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 giant issues of work-life balance here. I mean,
Yeah.
the expectation is if you're working outside of the house, you are sacrificing
Yeah.
all of your family time in so many career positions here. And
Mhm.
you're absolutely right in that, like, if guys want to have a better work-life balance and spend time with their kids, they need to be more supportive of correcting these imbalances.
Exactly. Well, they have the
It makes
power.
sense.
I mean, again, it's like, the comments of, well, why didn't she report it or why didn't she do this? You're putting the work on people who do not have voice and do not have the autonomy to change the rules. And I will truly say, I don't think that career opportunities and work-life balance and motherhood is going to get better for women until these issues get better for men because men decide to make them better because they're the
Yeah,
ones that have power.
demand better and but demanding better for everyone. And
Yeah,
because it's not a
absolutely.
zero-sum game. It's not like if we make
Not
women better,
pie.
they'll be
It's not
worse
pie. Yeah.
or yeah, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, I think that there's one thing I want to add, but it seems like we've talked about uh, uh, most of the angles here. But for anyone who's dismissive still of the idea that there's a mommy track or that it's harder to get into career positions as a woman, all you have to do is look at the Tokyo medical dental scandal of a few years ago, where women, we're talking about the women who go off and take the exam on that all important exam day. Um, if they scored more than male candidates, they were the males with the lower scores were accepted into the university and the women were not. You had to really score high as a woman to be accepted. The
See,
the
here's
the
what I'm
line
going
to
to
be accepted, and the justification by the university was, well, we need doctors who aren't going to leave and become a
profession.
mom and leave their job. We need doctors. So what I take from that is I've told you this before, but from now on I'm only going to see female doctors in this country
Exactly.
because the
Yep.
chance that I'm going to get one of those inferior guys that got in on the lower test score, I don't want that guy as my doctor.
The whole thing about the diversity, equity, and inclusion that's happening. And again, I'm trying not to be political and, everything that's happening with the United States. But
Mhm.
I said earlier, women have got to be twice as good to be given half the credit. Again, I was told, well, you only got the jump because you're a woman. And yet here we have, a medical scandal where men only got in because they have a penis.
Mhm.
Less deserving men got in because society does not want to address the lack of work-life balance for medical professionals, and no one wants to investigate why women leave the medical profession in the numbers that they do. They would rather just have lesser qualified men operating on us.
Great.
Yay.
Yay.
It just, and again, this is the whole, you only got hired by a woman. You only got hired because you're black. You only got hired because you're gay.
Um,
Just
so
lesser qualified men taking the spots of more deserving women. I mean, I think that's just a rampant theme in this country when you look at companies and leadership. And I
yeah.
could I could go on and on and on about
Well,
you know,
well, you
the
remember that
importance of
photo I
diversity in leadership and decision makers and how it affects the bank balance of those companies. Look
yeah,
at the Fortune 500 companies. The top companies have diversity in leadership. They have more women than your average in leadership positions, decision-making positions.
yeah.
So it's like, for Japan, it's like, I don't know, how's your economy working out for you? How's the yen working out for you? You know what you could do to kind of change things around? Might want to diversify your leadership.
Get some new ideas.
Why are the continual self-infliction is beyond my comprehension.
Right. Well, I think we've talked just about everything, and I really, really genuinely appreciate the fact that you came on and talked about things from a very, very personal place, and also from just like a fact base from what the reality is here for a lot of the situations around.
I'm gonna go and fact checked everything now.
Well, no, I mean, like
I encourage you to do that.
there
Please
wasn't
do.
anything you said
I
that
can
didn't
learn.
track. Like, the child safety thing, just bringing up the fact, well, they got alarms, the line group is sending these alerts and everything. These things are all just uh, true about what the
Yeah.
situation actually is, and all of the experiences that you had personally, and that the people you've talked to had personally, and you've got issues like the Tokyo medical dental scandal that show that.
Or we could talk about the suspended sentence of the former diet worker who was a 12 or 13-year-old and got a 4-year suspended sentence.
Hmm. Yeah.
Rules
Like
made by
what
men.
is what is that? Yeah, like how does that happen? Is that another hush money thing? Is that
Yes.
yeah.
Yep. There was money paid off. I'm sure that
Yeah.
money will cover her counseling. And you look at oh, I can't think of the name right now. The former self-defense force woman who
Yeah.
fought. And I can't think of her name right now. But these women should be commended for speaking out the way that they do because they are risking their safety.
Right.
They're risking their mental health to raise awareness on what has happened to them and to try and fix things. And again, you have these women who are speaking out, you have, and I don't want to call them victims, they're survivors, but where are the men? Why are there not more men speaking out and fighting for women? And then it comes back to like, well, until I got married or until I had a daughter, I didn't know. And I
Mm.
could say that as well. I didn't realize about children's safety until, I had my own son. But, it was like, oh, until I had a daughter. We go back to, would you choose the bear or would you choose the man? Men have got to step up a lot more and hold their friends more accountable and hold men more accountable as a generalization. There needs to be more accountability being held by men for men, to men. Whereas a lot of the times it's, conversations that we've had today. Well, women choose lesser jobs, women choose this, women choose that, women should fight more, women should report more. All the work seems to be put on us.
Hmm.
And we're not the ones who have the power to change things. We can influence change, but
Maybe this video will in some small way get some influence out there as well.
maybe,
Maybe.
hopefully. I'm curious to see what the comments are going to be.
Yeah, this should be fun. This is not the usual topic on the channel, but I think the topics I choose for this channel are I try to do a really uh wide variety of things and things that I'm particularly interested in, and the gender dynamics in this country are something I am absolutely interested in because
There's a lot of
I've
remarkable
seen
things.
I mean, I've seen again and again, not just friends and colleagues like yourself, but I also think about the female students that I know are graduating from my classes who are very driven and are very interested in having uh, a strong career, and they're going to be dealing with all these issues about how they're going to balance society's expectations, men's expectations, the other women's expectations of what a good mommy is. Uh, and honestly, like the number of really strong, independent, amazing female students that I've had are living overseas now. They left Japan.
Brain drain is huge.
Brain drain.
The
And
brain
it's
drain
like
of
if
Japanese women is
you want to keep the 50% of the population's talent here in the country, to help with the economic woes, and not to mention, falling birth rate and everything else. Yeah, you gotta make it better. And then
definitely got to make it better. And I will say I'm very, I encourage my amazing female students to get out.
hmm,
You know, they deserve better than what this country is willing to offer them. And some people are going to come and say, "Oh, you hate Japan, you're being so critical." No, I want Japan to be a better place because this is my home. And the only way that things get better is through change.
that's
And
that's the comment. That's the comment I've never understood. It's like if you hate Japan, why don't you leave?
why
Which
don't you
is
leave?
like,
Because this
no,
is my
if
home
you
and I want it to be better. So
yeah.
how do you fix things? You have dialogues, discussions, you have constructive criticism. Um, Japan is not doing well. We know Japan is not doing well, and pointing out areas where Japan can improve, I think is a form of love.
Mhm.
Your closest friends are the ones who are going to pull you aside and say, "Hey, get it together because you're slipping." It's that whole, they'll fix your crown in private. And a lot of, you got good, as a woman, if you got really good girlfriends, they're going to fix your crown, but they're going to tell you that it's crooked.
Yeah,
And that's where I feel I come into play now. I'm just not doing it so privately.
right.
I don't have an audience member of, I don't have connections with the prime minister.
Right. Right.
So, this is us fixing Japan's crown.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to adjust it to make it better for everyone, because
Yep.
I making better opportunities for women and having better work-life balance for men and everyone, like why would that be a bad thing? It's like the video I made way back at the beginning of this channel where I was just pointing out and with video evidence
Mhm.
that a lot of dumping of garbage happens in Japan, like off of
Oh,
mountain roads and things like that. And there was the comment like, well, if you hate Japan so much, why don't you eat? I'm like, so you
that's
think
not what
it's
I
so,
see.
so you
Everywhere I
like
go, it's
you like a
clean.
trashed countryside? Like that's your
That's not right.
position?
It's
Like
it's it's very misguided. It's very misguided and in enabling things that are dysfunctional and not working for the country. So, you know, we have different perspectives of what Japan is, where we are not inside the box. We're coming from perspectives outside the box. And, you know, I will admit sometimes I don't always want the perspective from outside the box when it comes to my life or things that I should be changing personally. But personal growth and development is about listening to, you know, the constructive criticism from others. And
yeah,
you
biggest
either move forward or you fall back. There's no staying the same.
biggest wake up calls in my life have usually come from outside of me. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Well, thank you, Tanya.
Thank
We've been
you.
talking for about an hour and a half, so we've got a lot of good material here. I'm gonna have a big editing job ahead of myself.
I'll have fun on that one.
Thanks. But thank you absolutely for finally getting together with me and doing this video. Like I said, we should no matter what the comments are, I think we should do a follow-up sometime in
Yeah,
person.
definitely. Definitely, definitely. I'm very curious as to what the comments are going to be.
Thank you everyone for watching. An hour and a half in. If you're still here and you haven't hit like and you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Please comment, join the conversation below. Thank you again, Tanya, for taking the time and really bringing out a lot of enlightening stuff and also amazingly tying it all together. It was really a pleasure to talk to you and a pleasure to see you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my experiences and my voice.
My pleasure. Thank you.